Здравствуйте, товарищи. Welcome back to Russian Through Propaganda. We're on day 32, and we're going to say some more today about the prepositional case, but mostly just practicing some more forms, looking at a few details. But first, let's introduce Yuri Gagarin. I think we've seen him already. Uh, well, who was Yuri Gagarin? Yuri Gagarin был первый человек в космосе, right? Первый человек в космосе. The first person in outer space, which is kosmos in Russian. So в космосе means in the cosmos, so to speak, in outer space. Да, Юрий Гагарин первый человек в космосе. Советский человек в космосе, right? So all of the newspapers you see there in the textbook heralding the right a Soviet person being the first to uh, make it to orbit. Right? If we look at a poster with a little handwritten inscription from Gagarin, «Облетев Землю в корабле-спутнике, я увидел, как прекрасна наша планета. Люди, будем хранить и приумножать эту красоту, а не разрушать ее». From Yuri Gagarin. Having orbited the Earth in a ship satellite, you see this kind of funny hyphenated form, basically just means in his space vessel or whatever. But at any rate, we see the prepositional endings, right? He was in this spaceship, в корабле спутнике. Literally, a kорабль is a ship. In this case, a spaceship, I suppose. And Sputnik is, as you may know, a satellite. The Sputnik, you may know the famous satellite that the Soviets launched. A lot of people may think that was kind of a proper name, but Sputnik just means a traveling companion, and it just literally means satellite. Sputnik, it's from the noun pуть, which means a path, and sa means you're doing something with someone, you're sharing something. And then a nik just describes a person, literally. So a Sputnik would be someone you share your path with. But in this case, the Sputnik was something orbiting the Earth, like a satellite, like the moon or the satellite of a planet, right? That's orbiting the planet or whatever. So the launch of the Sputnik, as you may know, kind of set off a panic in the West, especially in the United States, and that's really that really gave the impetus to launching a lot of Slavic departments or Slavic studies programs in the United States because of course, we're so lazy that we normally don't study anything or anyone unless they pose a threat to us of some kind, right? So, um, anyway, I guess we have Sputnik to thank for the very existence of Russian programs in the United States. Anyway, okay, so let's look at a few more examples here with how to use the prepositional case. Well, um, let's talk first about mobile vowels, right? We've seen this already, right? Certain nouns have a mobile vowel in their final consonant. And here we're talking about masculines only, right? Masculine nouns that have an or, a your, or a yeah in their final syllable. I think I misspoke earlier. In their final syllable, uh, and whenever we add an ending to that word, the mobile vowel is squeezed out, so to speak, from in between those two final consonants, and it disappears. Right now, remember we talked about that already, all the way back when we studied the genitive. Now, remember, now that we've seen a couple of different cases, just keep in mind that this is a general principle, right? It doesn't matter what case ending we're adding to words like this that have a mobile vowel. Whatever the ending may be, it's always going to be squeezed out in exactly the same way. All right, so let's just review this. Again, at this point, we can compare several different cases, and we'll see that this mobile vowel is disappearing in the same way, regardless of the ending. So let's take four examples. Щенок, puppy. Okay, our first example was of the puppy, right? Genitive, although this could also be accusative, by the way, because it's animate. Щенка, dative щенку, and now about the puppy, prepositional, a щенке. Okay, and in every case, the o has been, so to speak, squeezed out. Okay, let's take отец, father. Here we have a mobile yeah. Отца, отцу, об отце. Okay, ковер, a mobile your. Ковра, ковру, a ковре. And день, дня, к дню, о дне. Okay, that one is a bit tricky, kind of weird looking, I guess, maybe a little bit hard to say, but again, there's nothing really unusual about it. It is a soft noun, right? But again, it has a mobile yeah, and the mobile vowel is disappearing everywhere where we're adding an ending. Okay, so we can also insert a mobile vowel to break up certain clusters, and we're going to see more about this later when we study the genitive plural. But for now, we're going to be seeing this really only with prepositions, right, where we're adding a mobile vowel in order to break up some tricky cluster. Now, this we may have mentioned already that what constitutes a tricky cluster in a given language may really be anyone's guess, right? You may see one cluster that to you seems borderline unpronounceable, but that doesn't matter, doesn't bother the native speaker one bit. And then over here, you've got another one that's no real problem to say, and yet it's regarded generally as problematic, and we get mobile vowels breaking it up. The one example in Russian that is almost always broken up is mn, mna. You may remember that, and we'll be actually seeing this more later in this chapter. Towards me, or to come to visit me, would be kamenia, right? Again, we're taking a k or ka, and we're adding the o in order to prevent an additional consonant being added to that mn cluster, right? So instead of kmnya, which is maybe a little bit hard to say, although not impossible, right? We say ka-mnya. Okay, so let's, for now, focus on the question, when do we add, well, the issue generally is when do we add a mobile vowel to a preposition? And for the most part, at least right now, we're worried about, well, let me back up a minute. We would do this only if the preposition ends in a consonant, right? If it ended in a vowel, think about it, there'd be no problem, and there'd be no need to add an additional vowel to break up any cluster that's coming afterwards, right? So this is only an issue when we have a preposition ending in a consonant, or in the case of v, it is a consonant, right? So the same rule applies. Okay, let's give out this rule. It's very simple, but it always causes confusion. We add an or to v, getting vo, right, when that preposition is going to be followed by the same consonant. That is, if it's followed by a word that also begins in v, or its devoiced equivalent, unvoiced equivalent, like f, right? So if the v is followed by a word in v or f, and this is what students always forget, and or plus an additional consonant, then we use the mobile vowel in Russian generally, right? Now, again, the key here is that we need that second consonant. We need a cluster, right? We're only ever going to be breaking up clusters, right? So it's not enough to have just a single v or a f, right? We need a cluster. We need an additional consonant after that v or f. All right, so let's look at some examples. Vladivostok. Okay, it begins with a v, right? That is the same consonant as our preposition, plus an L. That's a cluster. So we would normally say во Владивостоке. Francia, France. There we have an F plus an R, right? Plus that second consonant. So we say va Franci. Va Franci. Florida. Okay, again, F plus another consonant, L. We say va Floridia, va Floridia. Okay, here's an example. It's not va Washingtonia because we have only a v, right? We don't have a cluster. So as you may remember from yesterday, we simply kind of hold the v for twice as long. Washingtonia, if we're speaking very clearly, but we don't need a mobile vowel there. By the way, if you may see this what we're kind of presenting as a rule here, you may see it violated, so to speak, in various contexts. So I can't say it's just an absolutely ironclad rule, but in terms of your formal written Russian, you should try to write the mobile vowel here. But, for example, if you read Pushkin or something like that. You may see this rule, and others like it violated. But again, if you see that here or there, don't assume that everything I've taught you is total nonsense, right? We are giving pretty good guidelines for, contemporary, standard, formal written Russian, right? Okay, so let's get some examples with v, right? We're telling you here in the instructions that all of these nouns are v nouns. Remember, we would assume that by default, unless we have some reason to think that we're dealing with a non-noun, right? Like maybe it's a big open flat space, or it's a noun that takes na for some other reason, as we discussed yesterday. Okay, anyway, so let's use v. Let's follow it with a prepositional case, and let's be careful to write vo, right, with the mobile vowel when necessary. Okay, in the country would be stranie, stranie. Note the devoicing, f, stranie. In space, в космосе. Again, devoicing, в космосе. Now, again, you may imagine writing these prepositional phrases as though they were a single word. If that helps you pronounce them correctly, that's a good, very simple exercise. Okay, in the restaurant, в ресторане, no devoicing. In Moscow, в Москве, в Москве. Number 5, in the city. Remember, literally within the walls of the city. That's why we're saying in the city. В городе, в городе. In Petersburg, here we're getting the devoicing. В Петербурге, в Петербурге. Number 7, in the dorm. В общежитии, в общежитии. Again, note that ending ee, that's 2 syllables if we're speaking very distinctly. В общежитии. Number 8, in the village, в деревне, в деревне. That can mean in the village or in the countryside as opposed to being in a city. Okay, in the hospital, в больнице, в больнице. Number 10, in France, okay, that's going to be во. Va Francie, va Francie. Okay, because we have a v or an f followed by an additional consonant, in this case an r. Number 11, in the backpack, в рюкзаке. As you may remember, that's an in-stress noun. That explains why we're stressing the yeah, because any ending we add to this noun is going to be stressed. В рюкзаке. Number 12, another in-stress noun, словарь. In the dictionary, словаре, словаре. Right, we get it devoicing. In the living room, гостиная. Look at that ending. That's an adjective. The long form would be гостиная комната, literally meaning something like a guest room, right, where you receive your guests, or what we would call a living room. Okay, once an adjective, always an adjective, right? This is a feminine adjective, so we're going to decline it as such, right? В гостиной, в гостиной. Number 14, in the hallway, в коридоре, в коридоре. Devoicing there to an F, в коридоре. Here's a nice phrase, пословица. В семье не без урода. Literally, in a family, not without freak. Now, next exercise. Okay, this is kind of a list. If you were wondering from yesterday, you maybe weren't very happy when we said, oh, well, some nouns take na, right? Well, the good news is that we saw some pretty good guidelines for guessing which nouns would take na. Now, remember, think of most nouns, guess v by default if you don't have any other clue that you need na. But remember, flat open spaces, or things like a table that's literally a flat space. You're on the table, right? Events are all going to be non-nouns. The points of the compass. A lot of geographical spaces like an island, right? That's kind of a flat open space. And then a few others that may seem a bit weird that we should think of we should just kind of learn them as non-nouns, like on the train station. Now, again, some of these, as we said yesterday, they may surprise you because, for example, well, we mentioned город is a v noun, right? In the city. Similarly, you are in the park, в парке, and in the garden, в саду. We'll actually talk about that later. That's a weird case ending. Because I guess traditionally those things were walled, right? So anyway, in exercise 32b, all of these nouns are non-nouns. Okay, so as we go through, let's just practice forming prepositional phrases, and we may ask ourselves, why is this a non-noun? Can we explain why it's a non-noun? But again, in a lot of cases, you just kind of have to learn it, right? In terms of, speaking Russian, you just have to know that it's a non-noun for whatever reason. Okay, on the sidewalk, na trotuarie. On the beach. Okay, that makes sense. A beach, big open space. Na pляже, na pляже. On the dacha. Now, a dacha, as you may know, is a country house. A lot of Russians have an apartment in a city, and then somewhere outside the city, they have a country house or a dacha. That term is related to the verb, dat, which means to give. And the term dacha originally applied not really to the house itself, but to the plot of land that was given out by the Tsar for service, right? And so you see the connection between dacha and dat, right? But again, now people hear dacha, they think really of the little house, but also the plot of land where they often have a little vegetable garden or berries and things like that. And Russians like to go there in summer, especially, and do some gardening and relaxing and whatnot. Okay, but knowing now that a dacha was originally the plot of land, we can see, again, for historical reasons, why it's na dacha, na dacha. Dacha is a non-noun, and it's a fairly important one. It's a very common thing in Russian culture. If you go there and make friends, chances are you'll be invited to a dacha, and you shouldn't miss that opportunity. Okay, number 4. Kitchen can be both, really. So again, you'll see this as well. Certain nouns, we can say na kuchnia or v kuchnia. I don't really know which of those is statistically more common. You can say either. It doesn't matter. Okay, number 5, земля. Now again, this one would usually be on the ground. That would be na земле. But again, this is an example where we could, of course, say in the ground, and that would be в земле. Class, that's an activity, that's a gathering. So that's definitely going to be na, and we'd say na занятии, na занятии. Number 7, lecture, another event, a gathering. Na лекции, na лекции. Number 8, post office. Historically, post offices were pretty big, sprawling buildings. And if you go to the central post office from imperial days in Petersburg, you'll get a sense of why this is, and you may understand a bit better why a post office would be thought of as a non-noun. Anyway, na почте, na почте. Number 9, on an island, na острове. Number 10, on the street, na улице, na улице. Number 11, a party is an event, a gathering, na вечеринке. Number 12, a train station. There's one we just have to sort of know that it's a non-noun. It's not necessarily predictable. Na vokzale, na vokzale. 13, a yard, meaning the yard of a building. For example, a lot of buildings in Europe are like this, especially in Russia, and especially in Petersburg, right, where you have what they call the splashnoy facade, right, this sheer, uninterrupted facade of buildings that are perfectly lined up, and then you have archways leading into these inner courtyards. That's called a dvor, right? And it's an open, flat space, so this one makes perfect sense. It's na dvoре, na dvoре. Anyway, urok, a lesson, that's an event, a gathering, na urokie. Number 15, on the carpet, mobile vowel, na kovrie, na kovrie. Number 16, stadion is a non-noun. Again, that one's maybe a bit unpredictable. Why aren't you in the stadium, as we say in English? Well, just deal with it, right? It's a noun. What can I tell you? Na stadionie. Na stadionie. Okay, 17, on the page. Okay, that makes sense. It's a flat space. Na stranicie. Na stranicie. 18, on the blackboard, a vertical space. Na doskie. Number 19, on the wall. Na stinie. Number 20, on the staircase. Na lestnicie. Na lestnicie. 21, on the escalator. Na escalatorie. Number 22, on the side. Na stороне. Na stороне. 23, on an embankment. This is an important term, especially in Petersburg, where you have these embankments, right, of all the rivers and canals. Look at the form, nabережная. Looks like a feminine adjective. Once an adjective, always an adjective. So on the embankment will be na nabережной. Na nabережной. 24, here's another good example. We're on the market in Russia. Now, again, think of a typical market, big, sprawling space. It may be under a roof, but not necessarily. Okay, in any case, it is a noun. It has a mobile vowel. So at the market will be na rynkie, na rynkie. Okay, let's look at a quick poster with pri. Remember that less common preposition, meaning literally like in the presence of, but often understood temporally, like under a certain political system, under the rule of someone or some, in this case, ism, right? При социализме, right? So under, we'd say in English, under socialism. При социализме нет места безработице. There is no place for unemployment. But при капитализме миллионы безработных рук, right? Under capitalism, there are millions of unemployed hands, right? Jobless hands, hands without work. Okay, here are a few discussion questions. Ты живешь в общежитии или в квартире? Do you live in a dorm or in an apartment? В каком общежитии или в какой квартире? Right, what kind of dorm, what kind of apartment? Remember, you hear the question какой. Typically, you would answer that with some adjectives, right, to tell what kind of thing it is. Number 2, ты был на уроке русского языка вчера? Were you on the lesson of Russian language yesterday? Ты был или ты была на уроке русского языка вчера? Number 3, ты пишешь иногда смс-сообщения на занятии? Do you ever write SMS messages in class? God forbid, right? Number 4, где тебе нравится жить? В городе или в деревне? Where do you like to live, right? Where does it please you to live? In the city or in the countryside? Number 5, ты был недавно на вечеринке? Were you at a party recently? А где была вечеринка? Where was it? В общежитии? В клубе? Right? Was it in a dorm? Was it in a club? Yeah, maybe в кафе, в ресторане, в дискотеке, right? Were you at the discotheque? Where was the party? Где была вечеринка? Okay, there's a good opportunity to answer with a prepositional case expression. Number 6, что у тебя в рюкзаке? Yeah, what do you have in your backpack, if I might be so nosy, right? Что у тебя в рюкзаке? Okay, number 7. Есть у тебя плакат на стене твоей комнаты? Какой? Right, do you have a poster on the wall of your room? Well, what kind of poster? Какой он? Right? Какой это плакат? Расскажи. Number 8. Что у тебя есть дома на письменном столе? What do you have on your writing desk, on your writing table, that is desk, письменный стол? What is on your desk at home? Number 9. Ты был уже в России? Have you already been in Russia? Or ты была уже в России? А во Франции? А в Англии? Right, some follow-up questions. Well, what about France? What about England? Okay, we've seen a couple of examples of adjectives that are describing places. And again, we've seen how this can happen, right? Some adjectives can stand all by themselves, almost like nouns, but they're still adjectives in terms of the endings we're adding to them, right? So let's just look at a few examples. We've seen a lot of these. Well, we've seen examples already of these. A vannaya is a bathroom. It's the komnata in which you have your vanna, your bath. Okay, so in the bathroom is vanny, vanny. Okay, gostinaya is your guest room. In the living room is gostinny. Embankment, we've mentioned already. On the embankment, na nabrizhny. Okay, here are a couple of neuter ones that are quite useful. Proshlaya means something like that which has gone by, that which is past. By the way, that is a prefix verb of motion. We're going to talk about this verb in book 3, and again, at that point, we'll understand why this literally means that which has gone past or something. Okay, in any event, proshlaya is a standalone neuter adjective meaning that which has gone past or the past. And so in the past will be v proshlam, right? We keep the adjectival ending. Budushaya, that's a participle meaning that which will be. We'll study participles like this in book 3 as well. But for present purposes, budushaya is a standalone neuter adjective meaning that which will be, that is the future. And the future is vbudushim. Okay, now note there's a 5-letter spelling rule issue. That's why we're writing the yeah instead of an unstressed or. Let's see. Let's look at a poster here quickly. Трудящимся здоровый отдых. Healthy relaxation to those who labor. Okay, and here we're advertising a beautiful vacation somewhere in the south of Russia, right, where every honest laborer can go for their отдых. So here's a little blurb on that that I wrote for this lesson. В Советском Союзе любили отдыхать на юге, на Черном море, в Сочи или в Крыму, например. Okay, we have quite a few things going on in this little blurb. В Советском Союзе, well, that of course means in the Soviet Union, right? Masculine. Советский Союз, в Советском Союзе. They loved, любили, right? Remember that third plural, right? What do they do? What does one do? Well, they loved to relax. На юге, right? There's a point of the compass in the south. На Черном море, literally on the Black Sea, which means you're at the seaside. Now, again, if you were literally in the Black Sea, drowning or something, well, that would be right? But hopefully you're like this laborer, right? She's literally on the Black Sea, meaning at the seaside. Sochi, in Sochi, now that's an indeclinable noun, right? It's a non-Russian word, even though this is now a Russian city. It wasn't always a Russian city, and Sochi is not a Russian word historically. It's an indeclinable noun ending in E, right? Now, Krim, which I won't get into this issue, but it's been in the news the past few years, as you may have noticed. Krim is now, I guess, de facto a part of Russia again. So again, I don't want to, refight that war at the present moment. But at any rate, in the Crimea is v Krymu. Okay, what on earth is that ending? Ooh, that doesn't look like the yeah endings we learned the other day. Well, that is a fairly unusual locative ending. It's an alternate prepositional ending, we could say, that's used specifically with certain masculine nouns to describe location. Okay, so more on that in just a moment. But again, Krim, that's our first example. It's not v Krymye, it's v Krymu. We get a stressed ooh. Okay, so let's think for a moment, how do we deal with foreign place names generally, right? Well, we basically just see how it would be spelled in Russian, and we try to treat it like we would any other Russian noun, if that's convenient, right? So Berlin, well, right, Berlin, right? Well, that's it ends in a consonant, so we're going to treat that as a masculine noun in Russian. Very, very straightforward. В Берлине. What about America? Okay, it ends in an a, right? So that's going to be easily treated in Russian as a feminine noun. So в Америке. Okay, what if the noun doesn't end in a consonant or an a? Right, well, then it's going to be a bit trickier. It's going to be almost always indeclinable, right? So again, foreign borrowings or foreign place names or whatever it may be that end in the vowels o, ye, I, u, those are going to be indeclinable. That is, the endings will never change, and that includes in the prepositional, right? So, for example, в кино, в кафе, в Sochi, в Chicago, в Baku, right? Azerbaijan. Okay, so let's try a few of these with just foreign place names. And, what we're saying here would also be true for foreign names, people's names. We're going to talk more about that down the road. But this holds generally for foreign nouns of any sort. Today we're just focused on locations. Okay, in London, that would be в Лондоне, masculine. Метро, okay, there's the foreign borrowing in o, that's indeclinable. So в metro means in the subway. Boston, that's masculine, right? В Бостоне. Okay, Toronto, that's a foreign borrowing. It's going to be indeclinable, right? So note that I guess there's no particular reason why that couldn't be treated as a neuter, right? But it's not. That doesn't normally happen. Okay, so Toronto, no change to the ending. This word is indeclinable. Number 5, гостиная. Okay, there's one of those adjectival forms, right? So that's в гостиной. Okay, got to always watch out for that. Number 6, Washington, в Вашингтоне, right? No mobile vowel, в Вашингтоне, treated like a masculine noun. Paris, also like a masculine noun, в Париже, in Paris. Number 8, Tokyo, okay? That's a borrowing in o, indeclinable, в Tokyo. Number 9, in a taxi, foreign borrowing ends in e, indeclinable, в taxi. Number 10, on the highway, chassé, that's also a borrowing from French. You may not know that unless you've studied some French, but at any rate, chassé, meaning highway, is not declinable. Na chassé, right, on the highway. Number 11, Rome, Rím, going to be treated like a masculine noun, vremye. Peking, Beijing, в Pekinie, Number 13, Philadelphia. Okay, look at that. Well, as you probably know, that's a Greek word, actually, right? Brotherly love. Anyway, it's going to kind of like philosophia, in Russian, philosophia, right? Another Greek borrowing that ends up being a special soft noun in Russian, special soft feminine. Same thing here. So we say Philadelphia. We end up with the devoicing of the v. We get kind of a double F. Philadelphia. Honolulu, right? Well, that's indeclinable. Honolulu, no change. Dublin. Okay, masculine. В Дублине. Number 16, Montreal. Note there's no te here in the Russian. Okay, that's soft, but it can still be treated as a masculine. В Montrealie. Now 17 and 18 here, these neuter expressions, adjectives in the past would be в прошлом, in the future, в будущем. Now we're going to practice this more very quickly when we start using verbs of motion. So let's get a little preview and tell where we're from, or in this case, practicing saying people are from these cities using is plus the genitive. Okay, so again, this is a bit of a preview. We're going to talk about this a lot more later. Let's see how many genitive case forms we remember. Keeping in mind that some of these may be indeclinable. Okay, so from München, right, the city of monks, is München. Okay, I I mean, the Russian here mirrors more closely the actual German expression, right? Munich, what we say in English, isn't quite as close to the German München. München. Okay, anyway. Helsinki. Okay, that's indeclinable. Think about it. Finnish city, a foreign word ending in E, indeclinable. So from Helsinki will be is Helsinki. Number 3 is Barcelona. Okay, that's going to be a feminine noun. Is Barcelona. Number 4 from Oslo. Foreign in or, indeclinable, is Osla. Number 5, Seattle. Foreign, masculine, is Seatla. Is Seatla. Number 6, from Praha, as the Czechs say. Prague, Praha. Now what's an H sound in Czech becomes a G, of course, in Russian. Praga is treated as a feminine noun. Is Pragi. Is Pragi. By the way, in Czech that would be Sprahi. Sprahi. So anyway, you can see the resemblance between the Slavic languages, right? Sprahe versus is Pragi, right? In Russian you have is, in Czech you have z. The same thing in Polish, by the way, z. Okay, so that's just a quick example. I don't know why I'm going through this, but again, lots of students are interested in how different Slavic languages hang together, how they're different, how they're similar. Well, they're similar yet different in a nutshell, right? Okay, number 7, Copenhagen, Copenhagen, right? In Danish or in English, Copenhagen. Okay, so Copenhagen sounds a bit funny, but it may be, in Russian, but it's a masculine noun, is Copenhagen, from Copenhagen. Florencia, right? Florence. Okay, there's another word that turns out to be a special soft feminine in Russian, so we get is Florencji. And number 9, Warszawa, Warsaw. Okay, again, the Polish there is Warszawa, and you see the Russian is mirroring that very closely. It's a feminine noun in Polish, it's a feminine noun in Russian. Is Warszawy. Okay, can you tell what city you're from? Well, by the way, we've mentioned this before, but if you're trying to know how to say your city or state or whatever in Russian, you can look it up on Wikipedia and switch the language of the page to Russian, and you'll get the official spelling, right? And you can answer questions like "Откуда ты? Из какого города?" Well, I'm from, at least I now live in Princeton, right? I'd say "Я из Принстона." "Я из Принстона." Or, yeah, в каком городе ты живешь сейчас, right? In which city do you live now? Okay, my answer would be в Принстоне. В Принстоне. Princeton. Put it now into the prepositional to tell where we live. В Принстоне. Now, again, if your city name happens to end in "a," chances are very good, right, that it's going to become indeed a feminine noun in Russian. You just want to, of course, check the spelling. But if it ends in any other vowel, it's going to almost certainly be indeclinable. You know, San Diego or whatever, right? Chicago. We saw Honolulu. Anything like that is going to be indeclinable. Okay, on 167, here is a list of states in the United States, right? So you can find your state here. I don't know if I want to read through all of these. You can do that yourself, but sometimes they sound kind of funny. And then you can get a sense of how, these familiar place names are sort of transcribed into Russian, which is usually more or less understandable, although it may strike us as funny. So usually when we read these in class, students get a kick out of it. I'll just read through maybe I'll read through all of it. Let's see how tired I get. Idaho, Idaho, Iowa, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Wyoming, Washington, Vermont, Virginia. There's a special soft feminine, for example. Wisconsin, Hawaii. Check the footnote there. That's a very unusual type of noun there. It is a plural noun because it's an archipelago, and it's just very unusual. It's a very unusual word in terms of Russian usage. Well, in short, how do you say in Hawaii? It's na gavayach, and that is a prepositional plural ending, ach yach, which of course we're not studying yet, but here it's inevitable, right? If you are from Hawaii, you want to say in Hawaii, that's na gavayach. So just learn that for now as an exception. Delaware, Georgia, Западная Virginia, Illinois, Indiana, California, Kansas, Kentucky, Colorado, Connecticut, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Michigan, Montana, Maine, Maryland, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island. I'm aware that Puerto Rico isn't a state. Maybe it will be by the time you're hearing this video. Okay. Северная Дакота, Северная Каролина, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, or Florida. You can hear either there. Now, of course, Florida, that would be closer to the Spanish pronunciation. That's a Spanish word, of course, meaning covered in flowers, I believe, right? Okay, so you can hear either stress there. Florida, Florida. Южная Dakota, Южная Carolina, or Utah. Okay, so let's practice a few of these. Let's say we live in these states. In Texas, it would be в Техасе, right? Just treating it like a masculine noun. In New York, в Нью-Йорке. In Colorado, okay, there is a foreign word in O that's going to be indeclinable. В Colorado, no change. New Jersey, there's a foreign borrowing in E, also indeclinable. New Jersey. Florida, okay, there we need the mobile vowel. Remember, F plus another consonant. В Флориде. And finally, in Virginia, that's a special soft feminine, so watch out on the ending there. Virginii, Virginii, E. Okay, from what state are you? Откуда ты? Из какого штата? What state are you from? Я is Tennessee. Я is Tennessee. I'm from Tennessee. You may know it from a popular beverage that starts with Jack and ends with Daniels, Jack Daniels, right? By the way, if you're ever in the Nashville area, lots of tourists like to tour the Jack Daniels distillery. It's quite interesting. You can see the safe. There's this in Jack Daniels' old office. There's this big black safe, this gigantic iron safe that he supposedly was trying to open using the combination lock, and he couldn't get it to open. He got so mad he kicked it, and he hurt his foot and got gangrene or something and died from kicking this safe. So that's a cautionary tale, right, for people who can't, manage their anger. Right, it could kill you one day. Okay, anyway, right, в каком штате ты живешь сейчас? In what state do you live now? I would say New Jersey. New Jersey. Okay, if you're not from the US, you're probably impatient, right? We're going to talk about countries later in book 2, right? So let's not get into that now. But again, if you just look up your country in Wikipedia in your native language, change the language to Russian, and you'll immediately get the official Russian spelling of whatever place you want to talk about, be it a country, a state, a city, whatever. Okay, let's look finally at one last issue we have to talk about in terms of the prepositional case. Now, we've seen already examples of what we can refer to generally as alternate endings, meaning that certain nouns, for often completely obscure historical reasons, take an ending in a given case that's different than our normal expectations, right? So it's an alternate ending. It's kind of weird. We have to understand that these are going to be seen in a very limited number of nouns that are usually totally unpredictable. Okay, so this can be a little bit frustrating. The key is to, again, kind of, as I like to say, quarantine the problem, right? This is a very limited, hopefully, kind of contagion. It's not going to be something we see constantly. So we need to pay really close attention to the nouns we do see where this happens, right? Today, nouns that take this alternate ending and just focus on those without imagining we're going to be seeing this constantly. So we saw an example already, Krym, right? We're talking about masculine places or locations like Krym that when we go to say in Crimea, or we're talking about being at the location, we get a stressed ooh, right? Stressed ooh as our alternate prepositional ending for a very limited number of masculine nouns. This is masculine nouns only. So anyway, here are a few very common examples, and there are more, but these are just a few fairly common ones. And we'll watch out for this as we move forward. Now remember, this is masculines only. It's only possible with masculine nouns. It's a very limited number of nouns. And we're talking about stressed ooh. So wherever we do see this ending, it's always going to be stressed. Now we have one example of the soft version, which would be, of course, stressed you, right? Okay, so let's just look at examples. In the wardrobe, shkaf would be shkafu. At the airport, aeroport would be v aeroportu, because that may be the most useful example right there. In the garden, also quite useful, sadu. Right, there are lots of gardens in Russian cities, of course, like Letny Sad in Petersburg. Okay, in the forest, v lesu. On the shore, na beregu. In Crimea, v Krymu. And on the edge, there's an example of the soft version, na kraju. Okay, one additional thing that makes this a bit tricky is that these endings are actually specifically locative. That is, the stressed ooh, where it occurs, only talks about location, right? So if we switch to a preposition like or, that does take the prepositional case but has nothing to do with location, then we don't see this alternate ending. So we would be back there to the yeah ending that we would normally expect. Okay, so this is all a little bit confusing. Let's just look at the examples and compare. Okay, so again, after or, we're not talking about location. We don't get the stressed ooh. That's specifically locative, right? So we would say ashkafye, aeroporte, осаде, о лесе, о береге, о Крыме, о крае. Okay, let's do a few examples, and these are all taking stressed ooh. So let's just practice using it. And again, maybe take note if we're really serious about this whole Russian thing. Let's take careful note that these masculine nouns take this weird ending when we're talking about location. В саду, на полу, на полу, on the floor. В снегу, in the snow. На мосту, on the bridge. На берегу, sorry, I almost skipped up on the stress there. На берегу, again, it's always going to be stressed ooh. And finally, в аэропорту. Okay, so there are a few examples of that alternate ending. Keep that in mind. Again, that's one of those, it's a fairly specific little item there, but again, if we're really learning Russian, we want to take really careful note there of that very important exception. And again, for the fifth time, just remember that it's very unusual. It's a very limited number of nouns that show that alternate ending, and again, only when we're talking about location. Okay, that's enough. So tomorrow we're going to talk a bit about time expressions, and we're going to do a couple of other little items before very soon turning to the main topic in this chapter, verbs of motion. So buckle your seatbelts for that. That's going to be pretty crazy. A couple of days there learning Russian verbs of motion. We'll have to rewire our brains a little bit to think about just going the way Russians think about it. And they think about it in a lot more detail than we tend to do as English speakers. Okay, until then, до свидания, товарищи.